Hello, I am Cady Coleman, and we are here for part two, really, of our Ocean Elders Town Hall. I had the privilege of being here a while ago. Actually, it seems like a while ago, but it was really just, I think, 2 weeks ago, and talking about space and getting the most remarkable questions along with my friend Jack Doan. And basically, we got so many questions, we decided we had to come back. So I'm going to show you a little bit about space, which if you would like to know more of what I showed last time, you're welcome to go to the first video and see. It was sort of a longer slideshow, but I wanted just to kind of catch everybody up and explain a little bit about what I've done in space and why I think it's interesting. But mostly we are here to answer your questions, and I will be joined by two very special guests that I am looking forward to answering your questions with them. And I'm just gonna start my slides here, and let's see. It's always a few steps to do. Coming on board here, and slideshow, and I hope you're looking at a space shuttle. When I see this picture, this is my first mission going to space, and I am sitting right under one of those tiny windows on the top of the space shuttle there. And we are at this point in time where you see us just crossing the edge of the launch pad, we're already going 100 miles an hour. And by the time we get to space, well, this is us the first time going through the speed of sound. So we're breaking the sound barrier. You can actually see the shock waves there. It's pretty amazing. And then we're in space. And I got to do that twice. This is my second space shuttle mission. The first one was 16 days of experiments because I'm originally a scientist. And the second one was to launch the Chandra X-ray Observatory. And in that space shuttle, right in back of our crew there on the pad, behind those big doors in the back of the space shuttle, that is the Chandra X-ray Observatory, the biggest and heaviest thing we've ever brought to space. And the reason it's so important to all of us is everything we know about black holes comes from that telescope. But the other very remarkable thing about our mission was it was the first time that a woman, a mom, was in charge of the space shuttle. And it wasn't me, but it was my commander, Eileen Collins, right there in the middle. But I'd like to spend most of our time, at least my slides, but you can ask me anything that you like. I'd like to talk a lot about the space station, because those shuttle trips, I mean, they were getting us ready for a really big step, which was let's go live in low Earth orbit and find out how to live there so that we can get ready to go back to the moon and eventually to go on to Mars. So every step is an experiment. And there's the space station right there. It's this, beautiful sort of star to you from the ground. It'll look like a star, but that's a view of the space station. It looks really, really huge. And that's because it just definitely is. The part that I think is interesting is we go up there in a group of 3. So 3 of us are in a tiny, tiny little ship. I'm going to go back here for a second. Just one of those tiny little appendages sort of sticking out. That's our little ship. This whole space station here is as big as a football field. It stretches end to end, and we live along the 50-yard line there. And we have about 10 modules that are all about as big as like a big school bus. And then a few small ships which bring us. So when I went to the space station, I launched from Russia with these 2 gentlemen, Dmitry Kondratiev from Russia, and on the right there, Paolo Nespoli from Italy. And we were a crew of 3. And then we get to, and that's how small our little spacecraft is inside. So that's where it's really small. But then, and that's the space station out there on the football field. So you get a feel for, how big it is end to end, and we live along the 50-yard line there. But now here's our group of 6. So the 3 of us come up, and now we're a group of 6. You might give some thought to when you're working in groups in school and now online working in groups, you don't really get to pick your groups. Well, we don't either, and we have to figure out how to get our mission done with each other. I've got about a 1.5-minute video here. And it just shows you a little bit about launching. We're getting ready to launch. We're climbing up the steps. We get into the smallest elevator imaginable. And now from the steps in Kazakhstan, from Baikonur Cosmodrome, the same place that Yuri Gagarin launched from, we launched into space up to the International Space Station. This is a Soyuz docking. And this is where I lived. I really loved it. Oh, that's my kid's little tiger right there on the robot's neck. It's just showing you a little bit about what we do up there. There's science, there's eating together. Look at our kitchen table. I'm a musician. I brought some flutes and flutes of other people I brought up there with me. And this is a view from outside of that space station. So it's kind of interesting to think about being in, looking out, being out, looking in if you're the space shuttle coming up. And then this is the Northern Lights. Isn't it beautiful? That was our, and here's the lights of cities. If you see little sort of sparkles and stuff, that's actually lightning. All the other lights are lights of cities. And it was actually kind of the way that we learned our way around when we first got to space. And I always end on a picture of home. For me, my ancestors came from Ireland. And so I love to see the island of Ireland. And just a tiny bit about what we do up there, because we go for a reason. I mean, there's a lot of experiments about just plain old living in space. And the reason we do them is because when we're up there, everything is weightless. And it's actually pretty hard to keep track of everything. I love this little video because it just shows you, like, it's just fun up there. And the fact that everything floats around gives us some possibilities to wonder, wow, I mean, to understand what liquids really want to do, well, we get to see that by looking at what water drops are doing. Because down here on Earth, gravity is a really big force compared to the tiny forces that hold liquids together. And so when we take gravity away, we can measure the tiny forces. It's the same thing for growing plants. Some things that are really small and hard to measure down here on Earth are actually easier to see up there in space because we've just changed the conditions. It's what scientists do. And that's me growing some plants. And space, these are kind of the sort of, I think, the things you think about from space, like, oh, we must spend all our time in spacesuits. Actually not. They weigh 300 pounds and they're pretty heavy. We only take them out and go for spacewalks when we really have to. But we do robotics, probably once or twice a week. Now we're having supply ships come pretty often up to that space station. And my last little video to show you is about living on this space station. I mean, we have to exercise just like you do. And this is my friend Mike, and this is videos of different crew members that some of them are friends where I said, hey, could you take a picture of this? I wanted to show things when I got home that I didn't have pictures of. And so this is Mike climbing into his sleeping bag. Look at our little cabin. That's our bedroom. Each one of us has our own bedroom, and then there's a bathroom that everyone uses that is actually bigger than those bedrooms. And then we learn how to fix things. This is Mike fixing one of the water processing pieces of equipment. And we get to eat together, which actually, even if we've had a long day, makes us feel nice. Looking out the window is something that we just love, every single one of us. Those little white things are clouds. The blue is the ocean. And think about this while you watch this little video. Okay, what if Sergey there was still and the space station was moving to the right? You think he's moving to the left, but he's not. And the last thing in this video to show you is that it's really fun up there, and you, as kids, would invent completely new games. Now, Satoshi loves baseball, but there wasn't anybody up there to play with. And so Satoshi had to be the pitcher. Now he is the batter, very good. And he had to be the outfielder and catch it too. So we're gonna have completely new games when we end up spending more time on the moon and eventually getting to Mars, which I think is very exciting. And even now, every one of those kind of interesting things that you see, somebody had an idea. Hey, let's do this. Let's make a little film about it. Okay, now with that, I'm gonna stop my slides, and I would like to introduce my partners in crime, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Jack and Lexi, who are Time for Kids reporters. And they are, I mean, I think you're really gonna like spending this time together because they're really interesting, they're different. I mean, all three of us are different, so you get all three of our perspectives on some of your questions. And I think it's hard. I think it's hard to apply for things. You have to be kind of brave. You have to be brave enough to say who you are and why you might have something to contribute. And Jack and Lexi each did this. And out of hundreds and hundreds of kids that applied, Jack and Lexi are 2 of the 10 Time for Kids reporters. And by the way, and maybe they'll tell you this too, I mean, I like learning things, and I like especially learning things from the point of view of somebody who is interested in the story and wants to tell it. And that's what I find in Time for Kids. And Time for Kids is free right now to everyone, because all of us are learning, but especially parents are learning, figuring out what they can teach their kids. And kids are having to go and find a lot of learning things on their own. So Time for Kids is there for everybody. And with that, I will let Jack and Lexi introduce themselves.
Well, Lexi, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Lexi. I live in Dayton, Ohio. I'm 12 years old.
And I'm Jack Doan, for a 13-year-old from Georgia.
And I've done a tiny bit more reading. It turns out that Jack and Lexi and I are all musicians. So what do you guys play? Why don't you share a little bit about what kind, now they know you play something, but what kinds of things do you like to do with music?
Well, I play mostly classical music on my violin.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to play all kinds of music on my flute, typically just basic stuff, and classical music, that's a common one. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a question. I'm looking you each in the eye. And I was going to ask you if you practice. And I'll tell you that when I was your age, I was supposed to, and I didn't. And then when I got to be just a little bit older, and I was actually in graduate school, and I took a jazz course, and my homework was literally to play scales and arpeggios, like bum, 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 right? Over and over again in every key. And it was so hard. And I would do them at making mistakes. But I did this while I did it every morning in my laboratory as a chemist. And like, it's hard. And suddenly you're better. It's hard and suddenly you're better. And late in life, I learned this thing that practicing was good. And so I'm imploring you and all your friends out there, practicing works. It really, really does. It's a little boring sometimes, but it really, really works. So do that practicing. But now I'm going to be worried. I'll bet you guys have already practiced, don't you? Yes, yeah. You practiced.
Yeah, I already practiced today.
Awesome. Do you want to ask me some questions that you have as reporters? Is that something you'd like to do, or do you want to go straight? This is kind of our show. We can do it any way we want. I know we've got questions that were left over from before. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead with some of the older questions.
Okay.
So, Alexi, you want to go first, or?
You can go first.
All right.
Yeah,
so, what first inspired you to become an astronaut, and how did you first become interested in going to space?
Well, I grew up in a household where my dad was an explorer. He was in the Navy. He was a deep sea diver. And so, and he was not in charge of, but he was in charge of helping to build the habitat, like the spaceship almost, where they would live underwater. And so I really thought it was pretty normal to live in a place that was kind of dangerous, that not many people lived. But it never really occurred to me that I could be an explorer until I was older in college and Dr. Sally Ride came and talked to our school. And so for me, it took seeing somebody that I could identify with. And it's still like that for me. I'm still doing things that are hard for me. And when I see somebody that, feels like me, that I go, wow. Or even when I have questions and I think, oh, I don't know if I could do that. And then I see people doing it. I'm like, oh, they're so good. They already knew how to do that. And then when I really talk to them and I find out that, they struggled as well to get ready and learn how to do things, I'm like, oh, they're just like me. So that's really what it took for me to want to be an astronaut. And as for astronomy, that was actually a little later for me, and learning about the Chandra X-ray Observatory, all about X-rays. And it's not something I knew, but by spending time in school, I taught myself how to learn, because I'm still always learning brand new things.
This next question is from Gregory B. And he wants to know, can you tell us about your time in the Air Force? What kind of plane did you fly?
I have kind of a weird answer for your question, Gregory, which is that at first when I was first listening to Lexi say it, I thought, I didn't really fly airplanes in the Air Force because in my first 4 years in the Air Force, remember I'm a chemist, and in my first 4 years, I did chemistry, and then I got selected by NASA. But many people from the Air Force that come to NASA are actually pilot astronauts. And so I was a chemist and a scientist, but then actually after I got to NASA, I was still in the Air Force and I got to fly T-38 jets. These are jets that are used to train pilots in the Air Force. And I mean, they're the kind of like long, skinny, they look almost like a dart, like you would throw it because they're pointy and there's 2 seats, 1 and 2. And I was always in the co-pilot seat because I didn't start off as a pilot, right? And they go faster than the speed of sound, which actually takes a lot of gas, so we don't do it very much. They can roll around like twice in 1 second. Not kidding. So for a chemist in the Air Force, this was amazingly fun, but it also taught me a lot about, practicing to be an astronaut, about, I know I'm spending a little time on this question, but I think it's maybe important, is it's things like you're flying along and I'm, we're looking at our gauges and checking and gas and this and distance and actually doing quite a lot of math to figure out how far we have to go, how much gas we have, those kinds of things. And then suddenly the gas gauge on one of the engines reads 0. Well, does that mean that we should jump out of that airplane because we have no gas left? Well, if there really is no gas in that tank, it's certainly something to consider. But what if the gauge is just broken? And even though you know this and I can explain it to you, when it really happens to you and you see that gauge, something happens in your stomach. And you feel like, and you don't make decisions as well as you might have. And sometimes you overlook like obvious things that could help you. And so that's why we fly those airplanes, is to practice basically communicating with each other and exploring all our options and not making hasty decisions, because that's what's going to happen in space, but we can't really practice in space. Okay, I promise to be shorter. What's next, Jack?
So this one is from Sophie and Kelly.
Okay.
What was the what part of training was hard as an astronaut?
What part of training was hard? Well, sometimes in school, and I did a lot of school, right? Somebody would say, this is what you need to know. And they would maybe give you a book or something. And then you'd know, I need to know these things. And then there'd be a test and they'd exactly test you on the test. But really being a good crew member took so much more than just understanding what all the switches did. And there's 2 things. One is, it wasn't just about like, it's like reading a recipe. You read a recipe, you're like, okay, I'll do that. I'll add this stuff. I'll do this. I'll do that. But then, when I'm reading the recipe, I'm thinking that. But then I start and I'm like, oh, was I going to add that all at once? How should I? And you have all these questions as you actually physically do it. So I had to learn that was important. The physical practicing. I would literally draw like on a poster the switches and I would go, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I would go to the simulator. So more practicing than I thought. And also the fact that you have to be part of a team. What's next?
This next question is from Michaela T. and Ross H. What does it feel like to blast off into space? Can you describe it? What were you thinking then?
So what if I turn this around, Lexi, and ask you, like, what do you think launching is like? What do you think it would be great? Do you think it'd be scary? What do you think?
I think it would be mixed emotions. Like, you would be excited, but then at the same time, maybe nervous.
You're right. And we actually had a few times in my first mission where we had a mechanical problem, so we didn't even get to go to the launch pad. And then it was hurricane season, and so we had a bunch of launches canceled. And part of me had trouble believing that a real person could actually be climbing into a space shuttle and launching into space. And then when you don't get to go, part of you thinks, well, see, it was never really going to happen. Like, it doesn't happen to real people, right? And so then on the real day, when the engines lit and we lifted off the pad. We were so excited, and we were all like hooting and hollering. We were 7 of us total. 5 had never been to space. And the commander goes, "Settle down." So we got a little excited, but mostly, we're actually watching the checklist and, looking at all the things that are happening and thinking, what if this happens? What if this happens? Because that's the way that we train. What's next?
Well, we have a question from Nemo and Kaylee. How did you feel when you saw Earth for the first time from space? What were your emotions? Was it scary or?
It wasn't at all scary for me. And not because I'm so brave, but, we practiced and I knew we were going to go. I was really just amazed. Like, I knew I was going to go to space. I mean, I'm not when I was your age, right? But after I got selected to be an astronaut and we practiced, we're on the mission, we're go to the launch pad, launching, there we go. And I've seen pictures. I know what it's going to look like. But then when you actually get to see it, and you look, looking down is just really interesting because, we can see a lot, especially at night. We can see highways, we can see city lights, and during the day, we can see a lot of the way the land is used. So it's really interesting to think, what is everybody doing down there? But then, looking out like at the curve of the Earth, we're not like far away where, we're seeing the whole Earth. I actually only see like the edge of the Earth, but I can see that we are going around the Earth in orbit, and that we're in a spaceship and we're in space. And I just loved it.
The next question is from Kirsten L. What does it feel like to float and bounce around in space?
I felt like I was living the life of Peter Pan, where, it's a story I loved. And the touch of a finger and you fly everywhere. I'm going for shorter answers so we can get through more questions. I get excited, I talk a lot.
And the next one is from Karen and Ellie. What did you eat in space? Did you eat frozen food? And what was your favorite astronaut food?
We don't really eat too much frozen food. We do when a freezer comes up to collect things for experiments. Often it comes up with ice cream for the crew, and that is very good. But so we don't eat a lot of frozen food. We eat about half dried food, like camping freeze-dried food, and about half of meals ready to eat, just like soldiers eat, that are in a package and just have to be opened and eaten, or maybe warmed up and eaten. My favorite thing was probably beef stroganoff, and I also had Thai curry. Those were my 2 favorite things.
So this next question is from Lori W. I'm sure this was a hard decision, but how did you decide what you could take into space?
Oh, it was definitely very hard to do. For clothing, actually, it's pretty simple because we have rules. And for the space station, we get to bring 1 shirt for every month. And no, let's see. Yeah, 1 shirt for every month. And then we get to bring 1 pair of pants for every month. And that sounds like so little, but it just turns out it's pretty much enough. And then they relented, and I think we had about 10 different shirts that we could wear. Now, we did exercise a lot, and we had shorts and t-shirts and, underwear for that. And so we had enough clothes to get all sweaty in. But for regular clothes, not too many. And then we had like a little place that we could bring up things for our family. And that was the way I got to bring my flute up there. And my son was 10 when I went to the space station. He really loved Calvin and Hobbes. And so this little tiger, he had one on Earth and I had one in space, and we called him Hobbes, or sometimes Hobbes. And so Hobbes got to fly around the space station a little bit.
And a question to follow up that one. Did you wash your clothes in space with the limited water?
You could. We did not. And think about how you would do that. Like down here, we'd put it in a washing machine. Well, I could have a plastic bag, and I could squirt water into it. And then with my clothes already in there, probably smush. But it takes a couple things that we don't have. We don't have time. And I mean, that's probably the biggest thing, is that we don't really have time to do that, or we choose to use our time to do experiments as opposed to doing that. And we're able to bring enough clothes that we just, when our clothes get dirty, then we pile them up and put them in our trash ship, which used to be a supply ship, and the whole ship burns up on the way back to Earth.
And when you were on the ISS, did anything go wrong? Have you ever wanted to give up because things got hard?
You know, it definitely happens. And for me, those times are usually that I'm thinking about, oh, how am I going to do that whole project? Or how am I going to be ready to capture that big supply ship with the robotic arm when I just practiced once and it wasn't a very good practice? And I'm thinking of all the way down the road how I'm going to do that. And the way for me to get around that, or to really just do my best, is first of all to know that I've done all the practicing that I possibly could do. So now I don't have to be nervous, because if you've practiced, right? And the other thing is, I try not to look, I try to have goals, but not look too far ahead. I just say, I am going to practice 10 times no matter what. And I do this with my flute as well. I go, I am going to play for 7 minutes no matter what. And then often I'll play longer, right? But if I just say, I'm just going to practice whether it's good or bad, and then I'm going to say, wow, I said I would practice and I did. And then sometimes I'll want to go on and do more. And so it's just a question of having goals, but then also have some little goals so you can reach them, and remind yourself every one of those steps is progress.
And we have
I'll give you a couple more of these questions, and then we might switch to live soon. And then we'll come back to some of these if we can.
we have a very popular one from Amanda. How does going to the bathroom work in space?
Oh, so I was hoping that you would ask this, because I wanted people to think. I mean, first of all, we're like, oh no, are we really going to talk about that, right? But I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and oops, let me just do. That's so interesting to me.
Katie, if you just click in the middle of the slide, now try the number.
Okay, there we go. Everybody needs help sometimes, right? Okay, so this is our bathroom, okay? And look on the right there, you see the hose, the blue hose with the yellow funnel there. So that is for peeing, okay? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But for everything else, okay, it goes into what looks like a toilet. And I'm dropping, no, I didn't want to do an actual demonstration, right? So I used these M&Ms to show you. But what looks like a toilet actually has a plastic bag sort of stretched over it with a rubber band around the top like that. And there's holes on the bottom of that bag. Now that is not intuitive, right? I mean, we're going to have all the yucky stuff go in there, but there's holes in there. Well, everything is being pulled inside by a vacuum. We've got a fan pulling things, and it's not a vacuum like this, right? It's just a gentle kind of breeze, and we need the holes in that bag to pull everything down to the bottom. And it works. And when we're all done with everything yucky, I'm gonna move this along a little tiny bit so you can kind of see another angle there. We pull up on that red tab, and it brings the top of the bag up like this. It makes it kind of tight. And then I can poke my bag down and poke it down under it. It goes kind of through some flaps. It never comes back up. And so everything yucky stays down there. Now, the good news for us was when that can was full, we would actually put it into a trash ship and it would burn up. The bad news for you is that you will probably be traveling further than I did if we're talking about Mars, and you are going to need that poop for fertilizer. Okay. There we go. Can we do like one or two more of these, Josh, and then go to live questions?
Yeah, great. Sounding good. Continue.
Okay. Who's next?
This question is from Donna G and Stewie.
Okay.
What was your favorite experiment you did while on the ISS?
I really actually loved experiments where we felt like our insight would make a difference. And we had a fluids experiment where just, you saw the slides that I showed of the water drop. That was a water drop, right? And we had somewhere it would be a container and it would fill with liquid. And just by taking pictures and video of that container, we could understand more about what liquids really wanted to do. But because we had such a close live view, and we would kind of have this sense, like, is the liquid about to kind of go up and move, or is it really kind of waiting and not going to go anywhere? And because we had that sense, we could do sort of just that right amount of jiggling that would help the scientists see what happens when that water moves. And so I liked the fact that our intuition made a difference. And I really liked learning more about liquids. How about one more from you, Jack?
And this one is from Scott and Kirsten. What is it like playing the flute in space? Do things sound different on the ISS?
So Jack, you're a flute player. What do you think?
I'd say not much. I mean, sound waves don't act differently in space.
I think you're right. I mean, it actually just depends where you play in the space station. Whether, like, I used to like to play up in the cupola, and it's sort of windows all around me, and those are kind of hard surfaces, and so the sound is going to be very, very bright. And then if I played in a module that was all packed with sort of cloth bags, then the sound kind of goes right into them. And actually, I like to play in places, especially if I haven't played very much. My favorite place to warm up is probably in the bathroom, because it's kind of this, I mean, it makes a lot of noise, and it kind of goes, oh, I know how to play. It reminds me that I do know how to play. And it was the same on the space station. I used to love playing in the cupola because it really, it was a very bright sound. And then after I'd played a little longer, then, I would feel like, oh, I really do know how to play. So, and it was a little bit different. It does actually kind of bobble a little bit. It kind of will get a little, like I have a whistle here, but a whistle you'd play like this, but a flute, you think about it being kind of in three places it's being held, like here against your lip, and maybe here, and maybe over here. And so you kind of have made this like stool. You have places 1, 2, 3 that the flute is resting, but gravity is actually the fourth leg of that stool. So when you take it away, it's like a little bit bobbly. And even when you play a whistle like this, it's still we're still sort of using gravity. And so it's a little bit harder to hold on to. I want both of you to be thinking of questions that are your questions. And so you can ask them anytime where we might have some slow points when we're trying to get people's live questions. So just be jumping in anytime that you have a question. And Josh, do we want to go live?
Folks, we have allowed you to raise your hand. Go ahead and put your hand up at the bottom of the Zoom interface if you'd like to ask a question. And look at that. No surprise there, a bunch of hands up already. Let's start by going to Bev, and then we'll go to Ryan. Bev, I'm going to give you permission to talk. You can unmute at the bottom left corner.
Hi, Katie. It's really great to see you. I saw you back in February at the SEAT conference, and so I'm really excited to be attending these Friday meetings. But my question to you is something that you said earlier, and you talked about how when there is changing astronauts on the ISS, that it changes the experiments a little bit. And immediately it brought me to my students and how sometimes groups are not always able to stay the same. Sometimes you bring new students in. Sometimes students have to move groups and be adjusted to a new group. And I wondered what advice you could give me that I could give my students when this has to happen. And I can say, Cady Coleman told me that this is what happens on the ISS and how they adjust to changes in personnel.
Hey, Bev, tell us what grade level are you teaching? Where are you about, if you'd like to?
Yeah, I'm in Southern California. I teach at Lexington Junior High School in Cypress, California. I teach both 7th and 8th grade integrated science, and I dabble a little bit in college geology and earth science. So I teach at the college level as well. So I'll be telling them that we spoke today too.
All right, what about it, Katie?
Well, Bev, working in groups, one of my favorite quotes is that there's no way to take the danger out of human emotions. I mean, or sorry, out of human relationships. I mean, there's just something, you know, you work with people, sometimes you like them, sometimes you don't. And it's really easy to wish that they were different or that you could be with maybe your friend, but there's always something to learn from everyone, and everyone brings something to that group. And especially if it's something that actually they're better at than you are, sometimes it's hard to recognize that because you'd like to think you bring everything, but you know what? I mean, every group, it is a better group because everybody brings something different. And I tell people that you have to let people surprise you. I mean, if you assume that you know who somebody is just from the way Lexi and Jack and I look here in the squares, you think you know, and we've told you a bunch about us, so you might think you know everything, but there's still a lot about us to discover. And so I think that the thing that helps me remember to do that is to keep my eye on the mission. You know, and if the mission is to get the experiment done or write the paper or go and gather references, then, you know, that's the mission. And does just thinking, oh, I wish that person didn't talk all the time, or I wish that person would say something, neither one of those kind of thoughts is all that constructive. You know, maybe the person that doesn't say something is shy. And I think about on my crew, I mean, I think about, does somebody have a question? Does somebody need help that they don't know how to ask for? I was kind of that person that would look for that, you know, and so you can, what role can you play in a group that can help you be part of the mission and get the mission accomplished? So that's a bunch of different answers. So Josh, while you find another person, Lexi and Jack, you could slip a question in there, I'll bet you.
Sure. Let's see. If you have one, Lexi, then go ahead.
And Josh, you can get your person ready and stuff. I was just thinking I feel bad we didn't get to all our questions.
Sure. While Jack and Lexi get that keyed up, I think we have Ryan. Ryan has raised a hand. Oh gosh, you know what, Ryan? It looks like you're on an older version of the software and I can't allow you to talk. But you can type into the Q&A and hopefully we can get to that. Maybe we can go to Jessica. Jessica, you have permission to talk. You can raise your hand at the bottom left. I'm sorry, unmute. You got it.
Hi.
Hey, Jessica.
Hi, so I'm with my brother here, and he actually has a question. We put it in the Q&A, so we're gonna read it off.
Okay.
What missions do you accomplish in space? What parts of space did you travel to?
These are great questions. So I accomplished a lot of science missions up in space where we did experiments like in chemistry and physics and plants, and actually experiments on ourselves. And we learned all about the human body up there. So that was very cool. And the part of space that we got to be in, oh, I forgot I have a prop here on my desk, is if this is the Earth, which actually I love to keep the Earth on my desk, then you might think for space, we're like way out here, but we're actually pretty close. And we can we're going around the Earth about 250 miles up. So it's not really so very far. And so just by being up here, we get to see the whole Earth going around. Nice questions.
Thank you.
Actually, we have a question from Katrina. Who or what drives the supply ships?
Oh, excellent. So I'm going to tell you that the supply ships are sent up. They are autonomous. They don't have anybody in them, right? And they come up and they either dock to our space station, which is like docking is like this, or we reach out with the robotic arm. Actually, I have a little robotic arm here. This is like a really great model of the robotic arm and how it works. This is the Canadian robotic arm. And so the Canadian robotic arm can reach out and grab that supply ship like that. But at the end of May, like in less than a month, one of the supply ships is going to come up for the very first time with people in it. And it's one built by the Spacex Company. And that's really exciting for us to be able to have ships come up. We've been going up and down with our Russian international partners, and that has been working really, really well. But we need all the ships we can get because we have a lot of work to do on that space station.
This question is from Sarah S. and James S. Can germs exist in space? Can the coronavirus exist in space? And what happens if you get sick while you're in space?
So Jack and Lexi, I read articles that you wrote about coronavirus, which I really liked. And for any of you out there, go and look at Time for Kids and look at the Corona digests that the Time for Kids reporters are writing, because I mean, this stuff is confusing and it's hard. And I thought both of you laid out there kind of, what you had learned about it in very, plain language that I appreciated very much. So Lexi, and Lexi, you're interested in being a medical technologist. Just your instinct. I mean, this isn't like a quiz because it's not a simple question, but just your instinct. Do you think that the coronavirus could exist inside the space station?
I feel as if it could, because if it was carried up there, it could bounce around from person to person as long as it has a host.
Exactly. And that's why actually even before the coronavirus, we actually do about 2 weeks of what we call quarantine, where there's only people who've been very, very educated about if they feel in any way not well, then they cannot be near the crew. And this includes even your family. And so you have to be at least 6 feet away from people, from regular people. And we don't get to see our kids within 2 weeks of launch. We don't get to touch our kids. It's really actually a very hard thing not to be able to give your kid a hug. But I did get to see him, but it was through glass when I launched with the Russians. But because we have that quarantine, we don't think we have coronavirus up there. And of course, we took extra precautions this time. So in general, we don't worry about being sick. It's not that we don't worry about it, but we're prepared. We have a lot of drugs and medicine up there. But we'd have the same difficulties up there as we do down here, is that there's not really a cure right now. And the best way to accomplish the mission is to do what we're all having to do, which is to be, socially distant, to be careful, to wash our hands. Even when, I know for me, I'm like, oh, do I really have to wash them again? I mean, I just like rub my nose and now I'm maybe gonna make dinner. I'm like, this is the mission, keeping everybody safe. I do have to wash those hands. So wash those hands. Who's next?
We have a question. It's from Haley, who couldn't talk earlier. They want to ask, have you been close to the moon or the sun?
That's actually kind of a hard question. I mean, no. Okay, so that I haven't been any closer. I've only been at 250 miles up in space, so only a tiny bit closer than you have. But when spacecraft are going close to the sun and other planets, and maybe bringing rovers to Mars, well, those spacecraft did not build themselves. And there's part of all of us in all those spacecraft, and especially the teams that designed them and built them and launched them. They are on Mars too. And so when you say, have I been close to those places? No, but humans are definitely exploring the universe.
This question is from Amara Y. Some people heard that you spotted a UFO. What did it look like? Did you see any aliens?
So I did not actually see an unidentified flying object. I did make a joke about an unidentified flying object because one of the other crew members, we were both trying to do something and fix a camera, and we didn't understand that mission control could see without the camera, and so it was pointing in all these like weird places, and we made all this bad video. And when we figured it out, he launched himself down the module and he like banged his head on the module as he would. And it was really funny, and I made a little joke that we had an unidentified flying object and it wasn't very good. But I was, of course, just making a joke. So I'll say I haven't seen one yet. And I'm excited to see what we do see when we really get to go far enough. But that's probably going to be you. Josh, are we still going with your questions, or how do you want to?
Oh gosh, there's plenty to choose from. Let's try Sophia. Sophia, we're going to give you a chance to talk here. Make sure we've got the right one. Go ahead and unmute at the bottom left, please.
So like, did you get to see like other planets, and like if there was something different, or like did you get to see any other things than you would be closer from Earth?
Space, I think you're asking whether the planet, because I was, had left Earth and was in space, did things look, could I see more? And I would say things looked different. Space looked a little deeper to me. And just, I felt like I was in it. I guess because I was, right? But so I felt like I was in it. But we're just, when you think about this, is the math thing. I'm not kind of one with numbers and knowing all my distances and sizes and things like that. But we're only just, if this is how far away Venus is, then we're only like a hair's like closer to Venus. So we're just not going to see anything more. And that's why we need to actually build these really interesting instruments.
And how did that experiment when you were growing plants, how did that experiment go?
It did not. Well, okay. Every experiment is a good experiment. It was a great experiment and it did go well in that we learned something. But what we learned was by growing our plants in Jello, they were almost drowning because the roots were always getting water. And so over time we iterated and changed that experiment so that we figured out by using some really interesting materials that let like water out, but not all at once. The plants now that grow up in space are literally growing not in soil and not in Jello, but in little pillows that have like little sort of like beads of water that are in polymers, that are in plastics, right? And so where the water can come out, but doesn't drown the plant. And so our plants grow with like little pillows of water around them. And so we from what we learned in that experiment, now up on the space station, they're eating lettuce and not just doing experiments. That's pretty cool.
This question is from Emmy S. She wants to know, what did it feel like when you got back to Earth and had to walk with gravity?
Jack, Lexi, have you ever been on a boat and then when you get back, does it feel different?
Yeah.
What does it feel like?
It feels like you're constantly rocking back and forth, just like on the boat.
Because you've just gotten used to that, right? And your inner ear has really gotten used to that. Same for you, Lexi?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so think about, and there's a video you could go and look up, I think it's called Splitting Hairs and Gravity. But if I took one hair from my head and I put it between my fingers and I pushed on something, just pushed, like not like, then I would snap my hair, right? But if I push slowly on like a handrail that we have up on the space station, like so to hold on to, if I just push slowly on that, I'm going to push myself across the whole space station. So it takes so little force to move. So then, and I'm used to just kind of moving. So then when I get back to Earth and I'm walking, it's like the giant people walking and your head just feels like you're going, whoa, whoa. I mean, it's awful. And actually it makes you nauseous. I can't speak for everyone, but it certainly made me nauseous and I didn't feel well. I threw up. But we have a lot of actually really good medicine for that. And I loved having that. Although I'm a mom too, and now my son is 19, but he was 10 when I went to space. But here is my friendly neighborhood, my friend who's a pediatrician, her favorite, like when you don't feel well kind of thing, is you take a sip of water every 5 minutes. You set a timer, not a gulp, not a big swallow, a little sip of water every 5 minutes, keeps you hydrated, and then you actually get enough water in you and you feel better. There's my space safety tip. It worked in space.
Now, I think this relates to one of the videos you showed us earlier. Are M&Ms a common snack in space?
It depends what we have up there. When our crew was up there, the supply ships were late for a while. And when we're talking about what we're going to bring to space, my friends all said, oh, we have so much chocolate up there. Don't bring chocolate. And then by the time we got up there, there was like no chocolate. So we had like no snacks for quite a while. But M&Ms are pretty popular. So Lexi, can you think of why M&Ms would be a really convenient snack up there?
Maybe because they're very small and compact. And so like if they do float away, you can just like almost swim over to them and then just grab them.
So what about what do you think would be bad snacks up there?
Maybe something like applesauce.
What about Jack? Any ideas?
Something with like Crumbs annoying.
Oh, could you say it again? You froze for a second there, Jack.
I think things with lots of crumbs, so like saltines.
Yep. And that's kind of, I was sort of pushing you guys in that direction, like potato chips or those kind of snacks, or even cookies that have crumbs. And so now think of the bathroom, okay, and how we control things in the bathroom. We always try to use a vacuum to make sure things go where they want to go. That's actually our way of eating potato chips and things with crumbs, is I would, on purpose, I would eat them over a screen where I knew there was a fan that's pulling air there. And so then I would eat my potato chips. Some crumbs would be on the screen, but not go through the thing there. And then when I was done, I would vacuum the screen. So that's our way to, so we can find a way to eat bad snacks. Josh, do you have more questions you want for us? I know we were going to sort of do statements and things, but I'm happy to try to slide a few lightning questions in there.
I think if we can go to one more, let's try Carlos. Carlos, go ahead and ask your, oh, I'm sorry, it's not letting me. Looks like an older version won't allow us. How about we try Val? One more question verbally. Val, can you go ahead and unmute at the bottom left?
Oh, yes. Thank you for taking my question. Just wanted to know, how long does the astronaut training last, and does NASA have any plans for a future moonwalk?
Well, I like to say that training is kind of forever. And I would travel a lot back and forth to visit International Space Station, so traveling to Russia, Japan, Canada, Europe. And so I would always be on a plane, and I would always bring something to read, and I felt like I could read actually any book and learn something that would make me a better astronaut. So training is kind of a lifelong thing for us. I'm retired from NASA now, but I still feel like a lifelong learner. And just yesterday, we had very exciting news about our Back to the Moon program, which is if you're gonna go back to the moon, the first thing you're going to have to do is land on the moon. And NASA selected three companies that have different approaches to landing on the moon. And so this idea of going back to the moon, which is a great place to experiment, to figure out how are we going to live on Mars. I mean, a lot of people say, why aren't we on Mars, yet? How come that hasn't happened? Well, up on that space station, I mean, you saw the bathroom. We talked about air circulation. We recycle our water. These mechanisms up there, sometimes they break down. And for that 6-month voyage to Mars and maybe staying there for a really long time, I'd like systems that we have really more confidence in, because it's not going to be easy to have a supply ship come to Mars or even to the moon. And so we have some work to do, and we do that work in different places. Some of it we can do in low Earth orbit, right around with our space station that's around here, where we can go up and down. It takes only 8.5 minutes to get to space. It takes about an hour and a half to come around and land. So we can do supply ship things in low Earth orbit. The moon, about 3 days away, that is a place we're going to learn some things about how to do spacewalks with dust, about how to live on a planet that's not very habitable. And Mars is more than 6 months away. So that is a pretty long ways. And so that's why we're basically have a targeted approach to do some experiments in all the different places. And even here on Earth, we do experiments to get us ready for space. So more questions? Can we do that, Josh? Or where are we in our time?
Well, we do have about 6 minutes left, so I think it is a good time to kind of have some final comments and maybe last questions from Jack and Lexi.
Okay. Well, and so I guess I just really like to say to Jack and Lexi that it's really nice for me to be together with you both. And because when I get to see your faces, I don't get to see everybody else's faces, but it makes me think, what you might wonder about. And yet, astronauts are always, we have TV shows, we have people are talking, they make space shows, but what do you think that students your age really would like to know more about? Do you have any ideas for me?
Is it ever too late to decide that you would like to become an astronaut in the future or a scientist?
I really don't think so. And especially when you're your age, I think that's a really great question, because it means, first of all, astronauts are in general usually about 30 years old or so. So there's a lot of school and a lot of, you're coming to space because you do something that we need in space, and also because you've shown that you're just somebody who's a really good part of a team, and you have a sensitivity to others and understanding that they bring things to the team. So that all takes some time to develop. But this idea that it might be too late, I have felt like that. Even when it was my time to apply, I was going to call a friend of mine, and boy, she's so smart. She was the second woman test pilot. I mean, she's just so accomplished. And I thought I would call her and she would say, Cady, you're not an astronaut yet. I am already an astronaut. And, they're just waiting to bring me. I mean, even though she's actually very nice and she would never say that, but in my mind, I kind of feel that way. Like, is it too late for me? And yet, I call her on the phone, and it turns out that we're both applying together. We talked to each other about what we needed to know. We helped each other. And in the end, actually, we both got to be astronauts. But I've learned that lesson again and again and again, is that it's never too late. And you may be thinking about what you'd like to do as a career. And there's lots of careers, and you have lots of places to make those decisions. And I'm still deciding what I'd like to do. So I'm going to say it's never too late to figure out a way that you can help and you can contribute and you can really make your mark. Ever, ever, ever. Jack, do you have any questions? I think we have a couple more minutes, and then you guys could each kind of maybe make a little summary or say goodbye, or we'll figure that out.
Well, I'm pretty sure that most astronauts are picked from the Air Force, so would that be a good place to, start trying to get into the space program?
I think it depends, Jack, on really that whole question depends on what you love. And many astronauts do come from the Air Force. I hate to say it, since I am from the Air Force, actually there are more that come from the Navy. Believe it or not. But the Navy, the Navy has flying as well. The Air Force has flying. The Army and the Coast Guard and the Marines have flying. And you don't have to be a pilot. So here's where, it's really good to ask a lot of questions just like you are asking. Because it turns out that usually only about 40% of the astronauts come from the military. So less than what I thought. And so there's scientists, there's a former high school principal, there's a veterinarian, there's doctors, there's people who've done all sorts of things. And we're living in space right now on that space station. And we'll be living on the moon, and we'll be living on Mars, and we're going to need all sorts of people and all sorts of careers to do that. And it's really not going to work if, and I know you weren't really asking this question, Jack, but it's not going to work if you think, oh, I should do it this way. I mean, it's good to get all your information, but you have to come back to the fact that you're you and what really kind of feels right, and where you get your energy and where you feel like, wow, I love learning about this. It doesn't have to be one particular subject. It's just whatever is sort of you. That is who NASA is picking. They're picking you. And so don't go do something just because you think NASA would like it. They like you. And I'm really excited, hopefully, that many people on this broadcast will think about not just becoming astronauts, but becoming whoever they would like to be, and realizing that it's not just special people that get to be those things. It's us. Any last words from you guys?
Thank you so much for this very informative session.
Yeah, it's great to talk to a real astronaut. It's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Yeah, it's just great.
It makes me think. You say a real astronaut, and we do a lot of judging. I'm just saying all people, and I certainly do. Sometimes at what people look like or what they act like. And I came here, I wore my jacket so that I just wanted to be really clear that, I did this work and that it was kind of a cool jacket, right? So I wore it. But if I'm not wearing my jacket, when people ask me what I do, if I tell them I'm an astronaut, sometimes they look at me and they go, a real one? Like, of course, a real one. But because just think a real one must be so big and tall and somebody else, right? Somebody else that's just so amazing. And the thing to realize is you have to look beyond that jacket. And sometimes you have to put on a jacket to remind yourself of who you are, you know, whether it's your soccer uniform or picking up your flute or all those things that remind you of who you are. I think it's really important. But, you know, just try to realize that you never know who is underneath whatever jacket. And all of us can be whatever we want to be. So thanks for all the great questions today. And I will turn it back over to Josh to sign us off.
Katie, excellent as always. Jack, Lexi, wonderful contributions. What a great session. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Special thanks, of course. Go out and follow Cady Coleman on social media at @astro_Cady. Time for Kids reporters, Jack and Lexi. Again, wonderful job. And for more great content, go to time.com/TFK-free. It's free currently, offering that now for free to keep the conversations and the education going. Thank you, of course, to our sponsors and the organization Ocean Elders for putting on this program. If you have questions and want to learn more, mytownhallquestions@gmail.com to follow up. Follow oceanelders.org, find us in your browser, and follow us on YouTube to see previous recordings of past sessions. Join us here weekly. And my name's Joshua. I founded the Webinerd. We're a proud sponsor, technical sponsor of today's event. Upcoming sessions, May 8th, May 15th, we have more coming for you. We're going to hear from Nishan Dagnarian and also a blockchain event. Looking forward to hearing it again from Sandra Rowe. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to close things off. Please enjoy the rest of your day.